Welcome back, and we're here in conversation with the Artistic Director of the Stratford Shakespeare Festival, Des McAnuff. And Des, winner of 2 Tony Awards, a winner of 2 Oliviers, and you've worked across North America, you've worked in Europe, but you were a Canadian composer, a Canadian playwright, and a Canadian director, and a person who came to the festival, and obviously it had a huge influence on you. And all of that made it, aligned our stars so that you would come back. Now tell us about your first experience here and what influence it's had.
You know, my uncle was the Canadian artist Eric Aldwinkle, and he actually designed the first logo for the Stratford Festival, the famous Swan S, and did other graphics. He was really a brilliant man. And so I grew up on stories about Irene Worth and Tyrone Guthrie and Alec Guinness, and he was friends with them and was a great enthusiast, of course, for Stratford, and he was a wonderful teacher. And then I didn't actually see a play here until just right at the beginning of high school, which is, I think, traditional. And I saw David Williams' production of The Merry Wives of Windsor, and later I actually ended up directing Roberta Maxwell in New York, who was one of the stars of that production. And it did have a great influence on me. Michael Langham was, of course, the artistic director at that time, and Michael has come back to direct Love's Labour's Lost, his signature production, really a brilliant piece of work with our young company. They come out of the Birmingham Conservatory. Michael went on to be really an influence in my life. In 1978, I got a call out of the blue in New York saying that he wanted to have dinner with me. He'd seen a production of mine in New York, and I was only about 26, and he encouraged me to direct Shakespeare. He really and took, I think, an interest in my career. He was head of the Juilliard School, so he invited me to teach for him, and I was only, as I say, 26, so the students were about the same age. That was a great experience. And then within a couple of years, John Hirsch invited me to come back to direct at Stratford. That was 1983, and I got to work with Roberta Maxwell again as Lady M in the unmentionable play. So the Stratford has, I grew up in Guelph and Scarborough, and the Stratford's had a big influence on me as an artist.
1983, so 25 years later, you're here, you're the artistic director, and you are opening up the festival's season, 56th season, on Monday night with Romeo and Juliet. How long have you been in rehearsals for Romeo and Juliet?
We started the end of the 3rd week of February, so it's been a relatively long haul, and I've actually opened a couple of other shows elsewhere, one on the West End in London, just to kind of went away for a week or 10 days to do that. But I'm very, very proud of this work. It's an extraordinary acting company. I'm really thrilled with the talent involved in Romeo and Juliet. It's been a very gratifying experience.
Now, out of all the Shakespearean canon, to open up the season, what drew you to Romeo and Juliet?
Romeo and Juliet, sadly enough, it seems to me becomes more pertinent every year. It's of course about love, but the play is riddled with contradictions, paradoxes, and oxymorons. Oh, loving hate is an oxymoron that leaps, I think, out of the text. And sadly enough, we still live in a world which is riddled with violence and prejudice. No one ever explains the feud in Romeo and Juliet, and it seems to me that's true of most bigotry and hatred, that the roots go back so far that they're beyond the cusp of memory. And that's one thing. But the other thing is that I think Romeo and Juliet is really a play for young people. It's obviously for everyone, but because it features 2 young lovers and certainly his friends, Mercutio, Benvolio, and their contemporaries, I wanted to do something that really would appeal to young audiences, and I wanted to do a play that felt au courant, that felt meaningful in their lives, because of course young audiences are the future here at Stratford, as they are everywhere.
And speaking of young audiences, and plays really told from the point of view of young people, people. Hamlet's also one of those stories. I mean, it opens on the Tuesday night. It's our second opener, and I know you've seen Hamlet obviously more than once and enjoyed it. What do you think are the strengths of that production?
You know, I think again, they're just marvelous performances. I think you know, Adrian Noble is a master at staging, and Santo Laquasto, who's done the design, has I think really who really understands this space, who did your marvelous production of Coriolanus a couple of years ago. He's really I think pushed the envelope. This is really an exciting design, and I would say a kind of an electrifying production. So this will definitely appeal to young audiences as well.
The design for Hamlet is beautiful, it's spare, but it keeps transforming into different worlds that are all really specific to the show. In Romeo and Juliet, you have a beautiful, evocative set design which really takes you literally to Verona, and it does things. Tell us about what especially you liked about Heidi Ettinger's design here.
Well, Heidi Ettinger remains sadly enough the only woman to win a Tony Award for scenic design, and she is, I think, in the Tanya Mozevich tradition, really a visionary, and you know, for reasons that you will only understand if you come to see the play, it was important for us to root the piece in Verona. So we've used a kind of a Tuscan red. We've obeyed all of the principles of the Scenia and the spatial relationships. There is an inner room, an enter above, and so on. But when you look at the set, you'll feel like you've transported to Verona. And in fact, the set is, the bridge that we've used as an image, which also becomes a metaphor, is Romanesque and comes literally from Verona. Recently, I took my daughter there the summer before last, just to show her the Cappelletti mansion where Juliet actually lived, and this particular bridge. So this is on my mind when I watch the production.
Now, on Wednesday and Thursday, we got two very different musicals opening up, Music Man and Cabaret, in two very different productions, both of them in my view, extremely enjoyable. You asked both Susan Schulman, the director of Music Man, to tackle this, but also Amanda Daynard, who's a newcomer to the festival.
Right.
Can you tell us about what you like about both visions of those two productions?
I think Music Man is really one of the great scores in the history of music theater, and this is of course a legitimate and important part of the classical theater repertoire. You know, Music Man is, I think, a work of genius, and it was written by one person, you know, book, music, lyrics, and so it has a kind of singular vision about America. And while it can seem like Americana, it's really about a man finding his soul in a small town, and for that reason, it's, I think, deeply moving. And I think we all fear that we will at some point in our lives lose touch with ourselves, and that's really what this story is about. He brings art to a community inadvertently, but I think more importantly, he finds his soul. And I think Jonathan Goad, who stars in this musical, and I think he's associated really with classical roles. I think he does a marvelous job here. Cabaret is a musical that really was part of a major change in the history of music theater, and in fact, Cantor and Ebb, when they composed this score and took this project on, they combined the traditional representational theater elements from the early musicals, from the, let's say, the Music Man kind of period, and they combined them with more presentational elements. They would go on to do Chicago next, where they almost completely abandoned the representational work. Amanda Daynard, who I think is really a major emerging director, has done, I think, a just breakout production of Cabaret. It's really exciting. It's very ambitious. I just saw it a couple of days ago, and the audience went wild.